Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to the StarCityGames.com Players Championship. Day number 2 pregame show is what we're bringing to you here, brought to you, by our friends over at Ultimate Guard and Carnox Chairs. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan.
Good morning.
You had your coffee ready to roll?
Yeah, thank you for everyone joining us this morning. 2 special viewers, in particular, my children, Vivian and Griffin. Good morning.
Good morning, young ones. Especially you, Vivian.
Be sweet to Mama.
There you go. Matthias Hunt, good morning.
Morning.
Anyone to say hi to?
No, I'm good. Good. I don't.
No loved ones.
Everybody I know is already sitting right here.
Just like, all right,
Yep.
must be nice.
Yeah, we have a couple babies at home. Emma, hi. How are you?
Hi, I want to give a special hi to Cedric, Patrick, and Matthias, the family I have.
Thank you.
We're all here, and we're ready to talk about day number 1 of competition, what happened. We're going to review that and set you up for day number 2 here pretty quickly this morning. Day number 1 was a pretty lengthy marathon affair where we figured out the 4 players that are out of the competition, the players that have 4 buys in day number 2 of competition. So we'll quickly start by reviewing that by taking a look at what happened in our first group play in Legacy. We see the groups, the pods. Group A with Oliver Tomiko, Zan Said, Joe Lissette, Abe Corrigan. Oliver was able to win that one. Emma with 4-color Mentor. What stood out to you during that group's play?
So the big things that I liked in that group's play, I really liked that, one, Oliver was able to navigate the blue mirrors very, very well. And I also liked a lot of what Zan Syed brought to the table, right? He's kind of been known as a metagamer here on the tour, and he brought this Sultai Snow deck that had a ton of hammers that are really good for these blue mirrors. We saw Bitter Blossom, a bunch of main deck copies of Veil of Summer. He was low on things like Force of Will, these anti-combo, or non-card advantage things that you are going to frequently board out in those matchups. He just effectively pre-boarded for the matchups, and it paid off for him in a big way.
Pretty interesting stuff there. Oliver ended up winning the group with 4-color Mentor. Only person playing that in the field here in Legacy. Kind of an odds-on pick to do very well in this tournament, and thus far he's doing so. We take a look at Group B here very quickly. You'll see that Matthew Dilks got the job done there. He won his group with his Golgari Depths deck, taking out Dylan Donegan, Zach Allen, and Jeremy Bertarioni. Matthias, anything stand out to you about that group?
Well, and just in general with that group, I mean, Matthew Dilks showing a lot of comfort and taking his Golgari Depths deck into that. I think it's showing that there is some metagaming to be done, but a lot of players here are going to be, instead of metagaming, just playing to their strengths. I think Dilks, more than anyone else in our field, chose to do that yesterday. And while he didn't get a bye, he did end up making it in today, too.
Yeah, he absolutely did, and playing what he knows best for sure, which is Dark Depths, knows that better than any of the other competitors here in the room. Group C is what we'll take a look at next. It was Collins Mullen who got the job done there. He played Hogak, one of a couple people doing that, took care of Jonathan Hobbs, Season 2 Invitational Champion Chris Barone, and Harlan Fear, who had a rough go of it here this weekend. Patrick, anything stand out to you, especially the choice of Hogak this weekend?
Well, you go to Group B, and Dylan Donegan also went 2-1 with the same deck. And when asked about it, Donegan said, I think this is the best choice, not even close.
Okay.
Very confident in their Legacy selection. We saw a lot of blue decks gunning for other blue decks. The metagame broadly light on anti-graveyard measures, and the players who played Hogak performed very well.
Yeah, it was notable that there really just was not that much graveyard hate here this weekend. Not a ton of Hogak decks in the room, but for the players that did play it, they certainly did have some success. You saw that with Collins and his 3-0 through his group to move him on to the battle for buy stage of things. In Group D, very quickly, we will also cover that. You'll see that Colin Roundtree took care of business. He went 3-0. Dominic Harvey, Drake Sasser, and Edgar Magiesh were victims of Roundtree. Roundtree playing Death in Taxes here. The banning of Ren in 6, I think a very big deal, putting that deck back on the map. And Emma, I know that you said had you have seen the deck list a little bit earlier, you made it take Colin to win this whole thing, which is pretty notable.
Yeah, so he just kind of put on a clinic. Every round we had him on camera. Yesterday we saw a time-shifted match with him playing against Dom Harvey for that 3-0 in the pod. And game 1, for a lot of it kind of felt like it was going to be a runaway for Dom. He had a bunch of his card advantage engines online, like Sylvan Library, Leovold, which is great against the Walking Ballista, Rashad and Port deck. And Roundtree was able to pull it out with a bunch of Flicker Wisp tricks that you're not going to see from someone who's picking up the deck for the first time. It's very clear that he's made the playoff rounds of a Grand Prix with the deck recently.
Yeah, second place with Death and Taxes in Legacy. That deck was kind of pushed out of the format when Ren and 6 was legal in Legacy. Ren and 6 is gone. Death and Taxes actually looks pretty good, and he's the only person playing that. in the Legacy portion of our tournament. So we take a look at that very quickly once more if we can. Our Legacy group play, the players that kind of moved along, Colin Roundtree, Collins Mullen, they're through, Battle for Buys, all that good stuff. And that's good for them. The Legacy portion was kind of interesting because I think it was, I would say, Matthias, the most diverse of the metagames here this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think Legacy is very interesting because with the change of a lot of new Eldraine cards coming into an older format, along with the banning of Wrenn and 6, no one knew exactly where the format would be. The safe play that players were going to do is that a lot of players played a blue-white shell of Legacy. You know, so you have some of your things that you'd expect with Jace the Mind Sculptors, Swords to Plowshares. But then as far as what they put next to that, we saw a lot of different things. A lot of players going toward Oko, a lot of players going... Some of them even going more old school, playing things like accumulated knowledge. So while, you know, it kind of feels to me like you'd expect out of an Eternal format of here are the staples you're supposed to be playing, but from there it's really unclear where to go.
I think it was kind of interesting and notable, Patrick, that we just really didn't see any Delver strategies, which is something you're kind of used to seeing in the format. Delver, we had an Izzet Delver player there in Drake Sasser. We had a Grixis Delver player in Jonathan Hobbs, but of the 16 players, only 2 players really kind of doing the tempo-y, wastelandy, daisy thing. We don't really see, at least this tournament, not a ton of it.
Well, the snow structure allows these blue decks to play around Wasteland pretty easily, and I've always felt that the blue control decks of the format for years in different sort of permutations are favored against Delver, assuming that you can build the mana base in such a way that you aren't exposed to Wasteland. And now with Astrolabe and a bunch of basics, that's where we're at. What's really notable to me about the Legacy rounds is we had so many blue decks that were trying to fight against other blue decks, and what advanced through the pods. In Group A, you had Tomiko, but that was a very blue-saturated pod. Yep. And then you had Death and Taxes, Hogak, and Golgari Depths winning the other pods.
Very good point.
So the players who actually tried to metagame, play a little bit outside of the box, who in 3 of the 4 cases had no blue cards in their deck, those were the best performing decks. And it really speaks to, I think, the incentives to try to metagame. In something like the Players' Championship where the field's really tight, you're not going to have a huge edge on play skill, and so you got to be picking up your edges in your deck selection. There are players who went a little bit outside the box, performed much better than the people who were trying to out-blue the blue mirrors.
Yeah. Well, that's a really, really good point.
I think what I would say to that is, this is Legacy. This is a situation where decks in the format have had years of tuning and getting the deck list right. And you see the decks that are at the top are the boring ones. You know, Death and Taxes, this deck I don't think got any new cards in 2019. We had Hogak, which, okay, that's a new deck, but that is a very stock list. And these players who are trying to innovate 10 to 20 cards in their deck, I mean, sure, maybe an answer is there, but saying that you're going to find it and be able to compete against these decks that are very well tuned, I just don't think they had it.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that those blue decks where people were really trying to outblue each other, some players, as you mentioned, had Predict. Some had accumulated knowledge, so on and so forth. Matt Dukes came with a hammer in Dark Depths. Colin Roundtree played a deck that he's been playing for a long time in Death and Taxes that is now viable again with the banning of Wrenn and 6. And then that Hogak deck as well, which was very, very impressive for Colin Roundtree and Dylan Donegan. So shout out to those players who got to move on to the Battle for Buys. They locked up day number 2 very, very early for winning their group. And now we take a look at the modern portion of things and give you an idea of how things went. So in day number 1 of competition, we had the Battle for Buys side of things, and we had our Play to Stay side of things. For our Battle for Buys, those 8 players, they're locked for day number 2 of competition. What they were playing for was to get a buy in day number 2 of competition. And for Oliver Tomiko and Zen Saeed, they were able to do that. They won their groups. They got a buy in day number 2 of competition, and we'll be going over those brackets in a bit later on down the show. But for Oliver, Emma, he wins a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's someone where he was kind of the favorite coming into the tournament. He just is someone who didn't really deviate too far from any of the norms in the format, right? He brought a blue deck in Legacy. He brought Urza in Modern. These are the things that we kind of thought would be the best decks coming into the weekend, and his plan is just to pick the best deck and have a high enough degree of difference between him and the rest of the field to be able to kind of leverage the fact that people are gunning for it and come out on top anyway.
He's made it look pretty easy thus far, I will say. It's been a really, really good tournament for him. And we can't kind of downplay Zan either, our SCG Tour Player of the Year, Matthias. He's also had a really nice tournament. He's got a buy into day number 2 of competition as well.
Yeah, Zan Sayed is a player, I think, who's been pretty impressive on the tour, and this is the type of tournament that really favors him for a couple of reasons. Zan's biggest strength is his ability to metagame other players, kind of tune that deck to figure out the right thing for a situation. The Players' Championship is the tournament where I think he gets the most mileage out of doing that. I think so that's a strength. I think on top of that, the the Players' Championship is a 3-day event, which is a grueling progression of only high-stress matches. Yeah. I think Zan, as a player, has a pretty good head on him for navigating that without over-stressing about it. And on top of that, his play skill is good enough that all those, I think, make him one of the strongest competitors in this field.
Take a look at our Battle for Buys graphic here. Again, Zach Allen, Jonathan Hobbs, things did not go ideal for them. And you see Collins, Mullen, and Drake Sasser, they had to play against each other to see who had a bye. And then Matthew Dilks against Holland Roundtree, they got to play against each other to see who had a bye. Roundtree took care of Dilks, and it was Sasser who took care of Mullen. So they'll have buys. It'll be Tomiko, Sasser, Zan, and Roundtree that have buys in day number 2 of competition in our upper half of our bracket. Who stands out to you there, Patrick, as maybe the most favorable in this position? Someone getting a bye there, obviously a big deal for all 4, but anyone take the lead of those 4 to you?
I mean, I think that, Tomiko's probably the most technically skilled player in the field.
Okay.
I think that Zan has, I think Matthias spoke to it very well. I have not seen much more of an even keel player in the SCG Tour this year, someone who doesn't go too high or too low depending on wins and losses, and takes a long view when playing in these tournaments. And these events are extremely stressful. Mm-hmm. It is a major mental and physical toll over the course of the weekend. And I think just being able to steel yourself against the emotional roller coaster playing an event like this is as valuable as playing well and selecting good decks.
Fair enough. We take a look now at that graphic one more time because we got to go to the play to stay side of things. So for Dylan Donegan and Jerry Bertarioni, they were able to win their groups. Dylan Donegan going 3-0, Jerry Bertarioni going 2-1, both members of Team Lotus Box. So they were through. They rest pretty easily after those 3 rounds and say, okay, we're in day number 2 of competition, not a ton to worry about. But for Harlan Fear and Chris Barone, a tough road to hoe, and they are no longer in the tournament anymore. They lost their groups. You see Harlan going 1-2, loses out on tiebreakers, and Chris Barone 0-3 for our Season 2 Invitational Champion. Just a pretty tough tournament, Emma, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, and, he brought this Humans deck that kind of, got him to the dance, so to speak, right? He made the playoffs of a Classic to make it to the Invitational. He obviously just mopped the Invitational a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And so, he wanted to run back this Humans deck, but it felt like people were really gunning for it. A lot of the Urza decks, for example, had moved away from this sort of inbred Karn the Great Creator artifact hate strategy towards a more removal heavy plan, and that really punished the deck.
I'm curious what went wrong here for Harlan Fear too, someone who's been so consistent all year long, Matthias, and I thought that Modern would certainly favor him. Harlan's had a great year, and someone's going to get knocked out of the tournament, of course, but maybe more of an earlier exit for the captain of T-Nova than was expected.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. So one of the things is that Harlan on the tour this year played a lot of good stock 3-color decks. And I think when you're playing against a field where you are significantly stronger than the other players, like, at an Open, I think there's a lot to be had there. One thing, though, is not a Players' Championship. You have to adapt your play sometimes because you can't just assume you're going to bully people by outplaying them with good cards. And I don't think I saw the adaptation that I would have liked to have seen from Harlan. So he showed up playing these mirrors against players who are at his level, or in some cases, maybe a stronger player on technical play. And I think that might have just ended his tournament.
Yeah, it's a tough loss there for both of those players, unfortunately. As we take a look one more time at the graphic for play to stay, you'll see the other 2 players that did get knocked out of the competition. Abe Corrigan and Dom Harvey, they had a grudge match that it was a good one between the 2 of them, and Dom Harvey was able to come out on top. An interesting story between the 2 of those players because they have run into each other a couple of times over the course of 2019, but Patrick, you and I got to watch it. Dom Harvey coming out on top because we did have to play Standard in those grudge matches, and it was Jun Sacrifice barely edging out Simic Flash.
Those were 2 classics that those 2 played against.
Yeah.
Abe Corrigan, just to stay alive, just to get the opportunity to play that match, lost game 1 against Dominic Harvey, mulligan to 4, won that game, and then the match to even get in the position to play that match, which was also an absolute classic.
Yeah.
Dominic Harvey's game 2 in that match in particular, I think, is going to be one of the greatest matches played in Player Championship history.
Yeah, I mean, barely edging him out in that second game, fighting a drill bit to resolve a God Eternal Bantu in combination with Mayhem Devil to deal lethal, and then coming all the way back and winning game number 3. Harvey does move on to day number 2. As does Edgar Magalhaes, taking care of Joe Lissette, the defending champion, who, Matthias, we have not seen a lot of on the SCG Tour this year because he didn't have to come. He was the reigning champion, so he's already qualified for the Players' Championship. But unfortunately for Joe, talking to him, he said that he played Jun Sacrifice because he knew it was powerful, but he didn't get the opportunity to test it much, and it showed in that mirror match where Edgar was very well tested.
Yeah, Joe is a really strong player, and I think this for me, this was one of the surprises of day one as far as our players to be eliminated. I didn't expect Joe to be gone so quickly. At the same time, this field has gotten, I think, technically very strong compared to Players' Championships past, and also the fact that these are all new decks across the board in each format. That's something that for Joe Lissette, a player who really values his preparation in each format. I mean, I talked with him. He likes to be 50 to 100 matches in with a deck before playing at a tournament. But if he has to do that with 3 new decks, he doesn't have time for 300 matches of practice. And I talked with him, and he said he just didn't have the reps in Standard, and he knew that going in.
Yeah, and that makes Jund Sacrifice a really tough choice because that deck is incredibly powerful. But Emma, you know this better than anybody. If you haven't played it a ton, you're going to miss out on some triggers, some points of damage, so on and so forth, and not maximize your ability to get every edge that you can get with such a powerful strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw Edgar just kind of put on a clinic in a lot of ways on what was important and how you needed to posture all of your resources in the matchup. I know, just speaking a little anecdotally here, I've put in about 5,000 words over on the website over the course of my last couple of articles on sort of the tips and tricks of Mayhem Devil, posturing for different matchups, and it still feels like there's a lot that we're learning just watching these matchups from the truly experienced players.
Yeah, and Peter Goglowski, of course, winning Mythic Championship 7 with Jund Sacrifice, putting the deck further onto the map. We all know at this point that it's a very good deck, but there's a lot going on decision-wise, mulligan-wise, sideboarding-wise, all of it. But if you can harness it, you can go undefeated in the Mythic Championship like Canister did and hoist the trophy. And perhaps we see some players do well with the deck here as well. 4 players brought it to the table here this weekend. Joe Lissette is out, but some others are through into day number 2 of competition. And we'll take a look at that graphic to show you day number 2 of competition. Here's your setup, folks. Colin Roundtree, Oliver Tomiko, Drake Sasser, and Zan Saeed. They all have buys into round number 2 of day 2 of competition. So you see our matchups. Jerry Rotarioni against Dominic Harvey. That's Simic Ramp versus Jund Sacrifice. Matthias, I'll start with you. Any idea or any pick on who you think wins that matchup there between the Ramp deck versus Sacrifice?
In that situation, I think right now I like Jund Sacrifice in the matchup. That one to me is a bit closer, but I'll go with Jund in it.
And do keep in mind that we're going to kind of see some redundant matchups here because we only have 4 different standard decks come. We had 7 Simic Ramp, 4 Simic Flash, 4 Jund Sacrifice, and 1 Golgari Adventures. That was Chris Barone, who's out of the tournament. So for you standard fans out there, I hope you like Simic and Jund Sacrifice strategies because we're going to see a lot of it as we go back to the bracket. We'll show you another matchup here very quickly. We got Collins Mullen on Simic Ramp against Edgar Magish playing Jund Sacrifice. Patrick, I come to you very quickly here. Ramp versus Sacrifice once again. But Edgar has shown that he is very, very proficient in playing that deck.
Yeah, and I think that's why I would give a slight edge to Edgar here. I think that matchup is pretty close to a coin flip. I don't think the Jund deck is quite as strong as it is against the Flash style deck. But Edgar just demonstrated a lot of proficiency in his match against Joe Lissette, and with the deck that intricate, so many decision points, the game goes on for a really long time typically, and that's another thing that opens up more decisions to make. I think Edgar acquitted himself very well yesterday, and I expect him to do the same today.
Edgar certainly felt like that was his best deck of the 3 that he's playing. He's really excited to play Standard here this morning, and we're looking forward to watching him play it. Other side of the bracket here very quickly. Emma, we've got Dylan Donegan on Simic Ramp against Jonathan Hobbs playing Simic Flash. Matchup-wise, it's pretty close, but we know that Hobbs loves the Flash strategy. Yeah,
absolutely. This is a matchup that I think a lot of times is going to come down to the play-draw dynamics of the matchup. We want to see the Flash deck sort of get to ramp spell into protect things with its Frilled Mystics and so on. But if we see, say, the ramp deck on the play starts getting out Hydroid Crisis early, which you can't counter. Well, you can counter the body, but you're still going to get the cards and the life for your trouble. I think that the ramp deck could end up coming out ahead if that were to happen.
Yeah, that matchup is very close, very back and forth, because there are times where that Flash deck plays a Paradise Druid on 2 on the play and starts playing its 4 mana spells ahead of schedule, and then it's really tough for anybody to catch back up then. And as we take a look at our last matchup, it'll be Matthew Dilks on Jund Sacrifice against Zach Allen playing Simic Ramp. Patrick, I'm going to come to you because I know these are 2 of your favorite players here in this competition. You're not going to pick against Matthew Dilks, are you? You could never do that. That's your guy.
No.
I didn't think so.
Too funny. Great jacket this weekend. Again, it's just another case of, I think the matchup is very close. I think there's going to be a ton of decision points, and the burden is largely on the Jund Sacrifice player to navigate it well because they're the one making the lion's share of the sort of tactical decisions on the battlefield. So it's going to come down to that.
Dilks is a player who never lacks any confidence, and he's actually weirdly at his most confident here this weekend. More of a reserved guy, but he's kind of opened up his personality a little bit. If we've been on the floor chatting with everybody on our breaks, and Dilks, look, he's very confident here this weekend. He's got Golgari Depths, which is a deck he knows incredibly well. He's got Amulet Titan, which is a deck he knows incredibly well. And he's been saying that Corvold is Gristlebrand, so I think he's somewhat confident in his pick with Jund Sacrifice. That might be a little bit hyperbolic, but we'll see. I mean, I will say this, Corvold Matthias, incredibly powerful card in that deck.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we saw in that Jund Sacrifice mirror match, just as once this ball gets rolling, just how many of the cards scale as you get more pieces of the puzzle out.
Yeah, and that deck is incredibly powerful once it does get rolling, so we'll see if Dilks is able to harness that deck. It does seem within his range to be able to play a deck like that, though. These intricate kind of mid-rangey decks that do have explosive capabilities to them in Golgari Depths, which is a little bit faster, more of a combo-y deck, but Amulet Titan kind of plays a mid-range game that Dilks is very familiar with. And this Jund Sacrifice deck, Emma, as you said, you've written a lot of words about the deck, a lot of decisions. Seems like it's in Matt's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the spot where we see Dilks as sort of someone who solves puzzles a lot of the time. He needs to try to figure out how to thread a needle with the resources that he has given to keep the game just out of reach of what his opponent is doing. And it feels like that's going to favor him in this type of matchup.
Well, that's the top bracket. Do want to let you know that the bottom bracket, this is going to be a double elimination tournament. So in the upper bracket, it's going to be standard. In the bottom bracket, it's going to be modern. So players will shift. This is empty right now, but we're going to work through a double elimination bracket all throughout the day. We got to work out who's going to be in the top 4 tomorrow, where it will be best of 3 matches across 3 formats. So we got a long-ish day ahead of us today and a very fun and exciting day in front of us tomorrow to crown ourselves a champion. Speaking of which, we got to make our predictions once again now, given day number 2 of competition. I'm not going to change my prediction. I'm going to stick with Dylan Donegan, who's one of the most experienced players in the field. Might be the most experienced player left in the field because Joe Lissette's no longer in it. Dylan played in our first Players' Championship, barely qualified for it back in 2014. He's here in day number 2 of competition again, and I can't believe I'm going to say that the 22, 23-year-old from North Carolina is our most experienced player in the field as far as the Players' Championship is concerned, but he is, and that's why I pick him.
I was forced to change my pick because Chris Barone has been eliminated.
Yes.
I wanted to stand by this pick, but I was told the graphic is busted and was really told by the production staff to change the pick.
Yeah, you have to pick someone else for a couple different reasons.
So, all personal humiliation aside,
yes,
I'm selecting Colin Roundtree. I think of all the players that in this event, the blend of skill on camera and deck selection, I think he's got the best shot in the field.
Fair enough. Matthias, I can't imagine you're switching.
I'm going to give you the whole top 4. All right, I'm going to say,
wow.
Yeah, all right, I'm going to have, all right, Oliver Tomiko.
Okay.
Edgar Magalhaes.
Okay.
Dylan Donegan.
Okay.
Zan Sayed. And I'm sticking with Oliver to win.
Fair enough. Emma, are you that bold?
How do I follow that up?
I don't really know.
Look, if it happens, that's all. Then I just then tomorrow's pregame is just going to be sitting here like this.
Okay.
Wow.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, I'm not going to switch my pick from Oliver Tomiko. Right in our Players' Championship preview article, we had him unanimously as the strongest player. He is biased already. He kind of crushed the first day of competition. He hasn't really given me a reason to change my answer at this point, so I'm just going to stick to my guns here.
Fair enough. No switches there. And then for Nick Miller, I think he's going to stick with Edgar Magalhaes. He's not going to switch things either. So there you see our picks now that we are in day number 2 of competition, and we got to get ready to play that second day. So we're going to take a little break here from the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia, and we do come back. It'll be round number 1 of day number 2. We're going to watch some standard action, work ourselves through some modern as well, and figure out who's going to be in the top 4 for Sunday. We'll see you back here real soon.